So the title of this video is supposed to be a joke about my second Pyro Traveler video, but I don't know how many of the people who are watching this video are gonna have seen that video or even remember the title of that video. But now that I'm explaining the joke, it's becoming a lot less funny, so I don't really know why I put this here in the first place. Hello! Iansan and Varesa's kits have been leaked! Yay! Woo! We get information! Once again, before the drip marketing came out, Hoyo, why are you doing this to yourselves? Varesa looks fine. Your average 5-star DPS. There's a reason this video isn't about her. I don't think she's that interesting. The one who's captured the attention of myself and seemingly the rest of the internet is Iansan. From what I can tell, Iansan is looking to be pretty good, but that comes with two caveats. Number one, this is a beta kit. The numbers probably can and will change. And number two, I'm bad at math. So as usual, I'm not going to talk about deep meta calcs and things like that. It's my opinion that because every character can clear if given enough investment, exact numbers don't really matter. I care way more about character feel than who actually does more numbers than each other. All this to say, this is a very vibes-based video. I don't care if Iansan is better or worse than Bennett or Fischl or Auroron. I care about what she does differently from those characters. Anyways, let's jump into it. Base attributes. She's a pull-arm unit and she's a 4-star, which I don't know why people complain about that. That's a good thing. Hoyo has a pretty good track record for 4-stars. So all that Iansan being a 4-star means is that she's going to be easier to get and she's not going to have a 3-second burst animation. I would actually argue that in general, the 5-stars age a lot worse than the 4-stars. Anyways, normal attacks. And I actually get to talk about them this time because they're not useless. They're still mostly useless. Don't level them. Nothing to say about her regular normal and charged attacks. They're as boring as ever, but she gets a special charged attack when she's in her Night Soul state. She jumps forward and then does a stomp that deals Night Soul aligned electro damage. This charged attack actually does even less damage than her normal physical one, but it does give her a consistent way to apply electro, and because it's Night Soul aligned, it helps her deal with Natlan mechanics. You're not going to be using this special charge attack all the time, but it's a good failsafe when you need it. So how does she actually get into her Night Soul state so she can do that charged attack? Let's look at her skill. Dashes forward, does some electro damage. Afterwards, she gains full Night Soul and then enters the Night Soul blessing state. And then afterwards, she can do a follow-up special charged attack that doesn't consume stamina. The rest of the skill mostly just details her movement stuff, and the rest of her combat capabilities are in her burst. You're lying. Wait, what? You're lying. Okay, alright, that's a typo. You see that the 5.0 originally came from the duration you have to do that follow-up charged attack, not 5 maximum Night Soul points. Same with the 54. She doesn't have a 54-second cooldown. She has a maximum of 54 Night Soul points. And the cooldown for the skill, which somehow got lost, but I hope it's still the same, is 16 seconds. All the skill does on its own is a little bit of damage. She gets a chance to do a follow-up charged attack, and she enters the Night Soul state with max points. Now the burst, which is the complicated part. We got a lot of numbers going on here, but here's the gist. She does her initial hit of electro damage, and then pulls out her limited edition kinetic energy scale for workouts. She then enters the Night Soul state and gains 15 points, so if you weren't already there because of your skill, this will put you there. The kinetic energy scale stays on field after you swap out, and it provides an attack buff to your on-fielder. This attack buff works in a bit of a weird way. Very different from any other attack buff we've seen. First off, it scales with her attack, not her base attack. The most common attack buff is a percentage, like Chevreuse has in her kit. The only two characters in the game that give a flat attack buff and not a percentage-based attack buff are Bennett and Sarah. And both of their buffs only scales, it doesn't actually say it here, but it only scales on those units' base attacks, which is this white part of the attack stat. You get that by adding together, in this case, Kujou Sara's innate attack stat with the base attack of her weapon. This attack percent sub on the bow doesn't affect her buff at all. Iansan is our first unit where that's not the case. Her buff is based on her attack, not her base attack. You will be able to increase the buff that she gives by putting attack percent stats on her. All those people who built attack percent Bennett are finally justified. To account for that, her talent scaling is a little bit weird. Instead of the percentage buff that she gives changing with the talents level, it's this number that changes, the max attack bonus. No matter what the talent level is, it will always be 27% of her attack. All that leveling the talent does is increase the cap that her buff can give. I think that's a really cool way of balancing it, but it does make it so that unless you're already hitting the cap, leveling her burst won't increase the buff that she gives. The higher her talent level is, the more attack percent you're gonna have to build to hit the cap. But anyways, how does this buff even work? Because I'm seeing two numbers right here, and the skill says sometimes it's based on her Night Soul points and attack, and sometimes it's just her attack. They made it needlessly confusing in my opinion. The way that they said it is technically mathematically correct. I mean, they're the guys making the game. I would hope it's mathematically correct. I think of it like this. The buff she gives is always based on her Night Soul points and her attack. The more Night Soul points she has, the larger her buff will be. This buff maxes out when she has at least 42 Night Soul points, which if she has 54 max, then that's about a fifth of her bar. Fifth of her bar empty, to be clear. Now, if we are to trust leakers, while she's in her Night Soul state, she automatically drains 6 points a second, meaning that if she starts off at max Night Soul points from her skill, she gets 2 seconds of her full buff before it slowly starts decaying. Seems like a pretty short buff up time, and it is, but Iansan actually has a lot of ways in her kit to regain Night Soul points. The first and most simple way is just moving around. And according to some notes that we have gotten from the illustrious Uncle Balls, everybody say thank you, Uncle Balls. He says that basically any time your character moves at all, that will be tracked. This counts idle animations, this counts skills that move you around, this counts burst animations. For some reason, it even counts character swapping. But the amount of points restored is based on how much distance you travel, so character swapping and idle animations won't be worth much. But it's important to note that literally any movement at all will be able to recover Night Soul for Iansan. Her A1 passive makes the free charged attack you get after using her skill actually useful. When she hits enemies with it, she gives herself a 20% attack buff and another way to regen Night Soul points. Every time she regenerates Night Soul points at all, she'll get 1 extra. If your on-fielder is a Natlan unit who is doing stuff with Night Soul points, every 3 seconds, one of those extra Night Soul points will be boosted from 1 to 4. So while it doesn't sound like she is strictly limited to Natlan units, she has some obvious synergy. Not only do they get about twice the value from this talent that other non-Natlan units would, but a lot of them have movement inherently in their kit, and they're going to be much better at moving around to keep Iansan's buff up. And I use those words specifically, keep her buff up, because I've seen a lot of misconceptions about her. She doesn't buff your characters more if they move around a lot. She always starts off with her strongest buff, but it will decay over time. The only thing movement does is restore Night Soul points to keep her at her maximum buff. Anyways, next talent, whenever a Night Soul burst is triggered, she gets an effect that allows her to heal. Every 3 seconds, whenever she restores Night Soul, she'll heal your on-fielder for 60% of her attack. Now this healing is abysmal. She won't even have full uptime on this talent if she's the only Natlan unit in your party. You can sort of think of this like Chevreus's healing, but even Chevreus can do a lot more healing than this. It's not a reliable source of damage negation. It's just a small comfort on a character who is already going to be doing a lot for your team. Between her attack buff and her ability to hold scroll, you don't need more reasons to justify putting her in your teams, but this will make teams where you otherwise wouldn't have a defensive unit much nicer to play. Whoever wrote her kit kinda sounds like they were just trying to meet a word count, and C1 is the prime example of that. When Iansan is in combat and is in the Night Soul's blessing state, she will restore 15 elemental energy for every 6 Night Soul points she consumes. This effect can trigger every 18 seconds. Her burst puts her in the Night Soul blessing state. She automatically consumes 6 Night Soul points a second, and her burst has an 18-second cooldown. They make it sound like there are all these weird conditions. Literally what it means is you get 15 energy when you use her burst. Why did they word it like this? I don't know. You said the same thing using 9 words on Jean. I was gonna say horribly obtuse writing aside, but C2 is actually worse. This makes it so that her burst automatically activates her A1 talent. Pretty unnecessary if you ask me. I guess it shortens your rotation a bit. The more important thing is that it gives your on-fielder a 30% attack buff. This is your regular everyday attack percent, no crazy calculations or kit descriptions. C3, not good. Her skill doesn't contribute much to her damage, so you don't need to level it. Her C4 is, again, way too many words to explain a very simple thing. If someone else uses their burst while hers is active, she'll gain an extra 8 Night Soul points. The second half is a lot more important. If she generates Night Soul points over her maximum limit, she'll get to keep 50% of them, and then apply those points the next time she generates more. It's hard to say how much this will matter until she comes out, but it will most likely help her stay consistently above 42 Night Soul points. C5 is burst levels. That's good, although this has the same caveat that I mentioned before. If you're not hitting the cap, leveling her burst won't increase the attack buff she gives, so C5 is theoretically good, but you're gonna have to build extra attack to make use of it. C6 extends her burst duration by 3 seconds. That's pretty good, and it also gives a 25% damage bonus to your on-fielder when her Night Soul points overflow. Like C4, we don't know how consistently she's going to be able to overflow until she comes out, but this is probably going to be a good con. And this is the part where I would talk about what teams she's useful in, but like, what teams can't you use an attack buffer in? You may have heard this a lot, but that's because it's true. Iansan is looking like a second Bennett. Now, there are a lot of asterisks that come with this, but they do fill a lot of the same roles. A fully invested Bennett is going to do a little more attack buffing and a lot more healing than a fully invested Iansan will, but that of course comes with the caveat that you have to stand in his circle to get those things. Iansan has slightly worse attack buffing and way worse healing with the literal opposite condition. You have to run around to keep them. Between the scroll set and her C6, she also does significant damage percent buffing, which Bennett can't do. His C6 is a 15% pyro damage bonus, which that's good, but it's not something that you really consider when using him. They also have different elements, which does greatly affect the way you play them and the teams they're put in. Iansan is going to be much better in Electrocharge teams and Danger teams, or perhaps even physical teams, who knows? Bennett's element is a core part of his identity. He gets included and excluded in a lot of different teams based on it. The same is going to be said for Iansan. So while they have similar things going on a surface level, they're not going to tread on each other's toes very much. There are going to be your teams where you want Bennett as your attack buffer, and teams where you want Iansan as your attack buffer. And I think that's fantastic. She's not Bennett too, she's Bennett's weird cousin. I know I didn't talk much about numbers, but if there are any major changes that affect the way she works, I'll put the update in the pinned comment. If you like this video, you can leave a like. If you like me, or if you like Iansan and you'd like to see more of her, you can subscribe. I'm definitely going to be using her a lot when she comes out. Hope you enjoyed, and have a lovely day.